Well, if you'll give me a moment to set up here, one of the things, I have to bring this up. This is going to sound a bit silly, but before I begin, you always want to check your audio, and it being Christmas time, I'm always reminded I've got 3 sons. Well, she says they're mine, but I've got 3 sons, and when they were little, Grandma and Grandpa used to come at the Christmas holiday, and they would, stay with us. And so I never forget, the boys were probably, my oldest 2 are twins, and the boys were getting ready for the bed, and they were down by their, I had some glasses here somewhere. They getting ready for bed, and they're down by their little beds, and they're kneeling down saying their prayers, and Dean and Ryan were their names. Dean's currently a commander of the United States Navy. Ryan's a ne'er-do-well physicist. So, yeah, right? So anyway, I hear Dean going, "And God, I want the Binford 1000, and God, I want the Power Ranger 926, and he's screaming at the top of his lungs. And Ryan says, "Dean, what's wrong with you? God's not deaf." And he goes, "No, but Grandpa is. And God..." So always check your audio, right? You don't know who may be listening. Jason Whitlock is an American journalist, and in a recent interview, he wondered aloud that if a 9/11 type event were to happen today, would America's first responders respond as heroically and bravely as we did in 2001? That's a fair question to ask, given the chaos and the absurdity of our times. And throughout the ages, people have always asked, was it the moment that made the legend, or was the legend the right person in the moment? Did the heroes rise to the occasion, or did the occasion just reveal the heroes? Now, I don't know if either option's the right way or the only way to look at exceptional, sometimes miraculous performance and those who achieved it. Were they right persons? Exceptional persons? They're at the right moment to meet the challenge? Or were they ordinary people? And despite being wanted in many respects, they rose to the challenge and they succeeded. Or possibly, could both options be true at the same time? Often the circumstances that drove individuals to feats that we recall with awe, with reverence, were predictable, like those we face as firefighters. And occasionally they were exceptional, and the actions taken were exceptional. Exceptional to civilians, but not to you, not to us. To us, they were expected. And to meet these exceptional challenges, we do complex scenario training and drill. And although we've rehearsed these scenarios over in our minds thousands and thousands and thousands of times, we always wonder if, when faced with a truly epic challenge, will we rise to that occasion? Will we be the right person at the right time? The truly heroic actions in mankind's history, in fire service history, always involves something beyond just mere actions. Seneca the Younger, in his work Moral Letters, wrote this: "Nothing is noble if it is done unwillingly or under compulsion. Every noble deed is voluntary." When we investigate the deeds that appear to be to most people to be out of tremendous empathy or duty, when we really look, we see something much more transcendent, much more foundational, something that we know is in the heart and soul of every firefighter. We find a vintage moral sense and a sense of purpose that drove that person or persons to meet that challenge in the moment. And rising up to meet a challenge does not always mean winning. Many men and women died rising to meet a challenge, but they helped to win the battle or further a just cause. We respect and we revere those examples whose actions were not only righteous, but wise. And clearly, in hindsight, they were unique, often morally courageous and exceptional. Heroes under close inspection are different. Heroes are never part of the crowd. They're authentic. They are who they are. They are you. They are the firefighter sitting next to you. They are real. Legends became legends because they often stood up in contrast to the popular opinion of the day, the popular position of the day, often against overwhelming odds. When we look as to why they stood out, why they really mattered, it's always the same story. They chose to follow their moral sense rather than their intellectual sense. Legends, heroes, displayed character when others didn't. They displayed courage when others didn't. Loyalty when others didn't. They displayed wisdom when wisdom was lacking. And participating in our calling, a noble and heroic calling, demands that we seek wisdom from our first day to our last breath. Participating in our calling demands we seek to, as close as we can possibly get, to operational perfection. We cannot be good firefighters without solid technical and tactical knowledge. We have to provide ourselves the opportunity to do our work directly functioning in high stress, obviously dangerous environments, professionally, effectively, and selflessly. Participating in our demand, in our culture, demands that we expect, not provide, expect exceptional character from each and every one of us. And character begins with self-awareness. And self-awareness is critical to our success, our team's success, your organization's success, and the safety of these islands. And recognizing this, we can't just simply train ourselves in tactics and tasks and rules and procedures. Clearly, understanding the mastery of those skills is paramount to being effective. But that's not what makes you heroic or wise. As such, we always seek to represent to the world, on duty, but perhaps even more importantly, off duty, who we are, what we believe in, and what we are willing to fight for. Those are the keys to authenticity. Those are the keys to self-awareness. And to be successful in the fight, to accomplish our mission as American firefighters, as Hawaiian firefighters, we need strong, unified teams. And strong, unified teams need trusted and credible leaders. Every member of our calling is a leader. And as such, we must be ready emotionally, spiritually, and physically in the moment when that opportunity arises. And when that opportunity arises, we must understand implicitly what can be done, what might be done, what ought to be done, and what must be done. If we want to build a future force that will monitor the excellence and the nobility that we have inherited, then we must unfortunately devote 80% of our time, talent, and energy to recruiting the right persons and training them continuously to be leaders in every aspect of our profession, at every juncture. And in doing so, we can rest assured that when those problems arise, they will be equipped to solve them, no matter how epic. We must continue to commit ourselves to training that grows each and every one of us every day. Training in our quest for greater self-awareness. Training that enables us to know ourselves better, our mission better, and those we serve with. And this commitment to training, it's not unique to our calling. It exists in several callings where failure is not an option. We will never allow ourselves to fail. We cannot fail. And as such, we define success not only by outcomes, but by motivation and by intention. And when we look at these moments where these truly epic legends were made, they understood the risk, they understood the sacrifice, they accepted it and met it. And all too often, when we look at those stories, a very similar thread appears. We're surprised by how few in number, but how united in purpose they were. We're surprised that how sometimes the perceived least amongst us turns out to be the very best amongst us. We're humbled by their bravery and courage, although some of them may have doubted even in themselves. When that moment arose, they were successful. And we find that despite their outward exterior, despite immutable characteristics, irrespective of past missteps, they all had that fundamental moral virtue to rise united in purpose and put others above self and remain committed to our mission. They did so because of unity of purpose. We gather here this morning in this most beautiful place of nature's most incredible blessing with the venerated Hawaiian fire chiefs. We venerate you because you've come here today to embrace and rededicate yourselves to Laua Lima. I apologize, my Hawaiian is terrible. That Kazoo was explaining to me there's like 3 vowels in 27 continents, or 27 vowels in 3 continents. I apologize, but Laua Lima, when I heard that word, when I heard that phrase, I thought, many hands working together, unity of purpose, that's what we are. Many people participate, many cultures, many ancestries, many faiths, many ideologies, but our diversity is not the source of our strength. Our diversity can support and increase our strength. Our diversity alone, however, though, is not the source of our strength. Our diversity helps build unity. It helps strengthen purpose when those differences are honored, when assumptions are suspended, when the respect is authentic and interaction is truly valued. And you don't see that anywhere in America greater than you do on these Hawaiian islands. These things produce unity of purpose. Strength comes from diversity united in purpose. Unity of purpose and self-awareness make for this indomitable character, this incredible will. Our nation, its motto, E pluribus unum, from many one. Today, we hear how young people today aren't being drawn to our profession in the amazing numbers we used to see. Our heroic mission no longer seems to have the appeal that it did in times go by. Salty old-timers recall when tens of thousands would come to sit for exams in the larger cities, competing for a few coveted slots. Thousands willing to sacrifice higher-paying jobs, thousands willing to volunteer to risk their lives for strangers, sacrifice time away from family, willing to forego far more lucrative and easier paths to stand amongst our ranks. Firefighters, cops, and warfighters. Now, this may be true. Maybe fewer hear the call. But you know, throughout time immortal, noble and heroic callings have faced this challenge before. But a handful always rose to the occasion, seized the moment, held the line, filled the gap. They became the archetypes of righteousness, morality, and unity of purpose, became legendary heroes that these living heroes in this room today emulate and live with awe. So maybe tens of thousands is not who we want. Maybe tens of thousands brings who we don't want. When we look for wisdom on how to recruit and select the right people, I think we have to start with the world's most well-read and revered book. It remains the fountainhead of all true wisdom. And as our chaplain said this morning, ancient wisdom is wisdom because it's withstood the test of time. Current fashion and trend is just that, current fashion and trend. But ancient wisdom is much, much deeper. If we look back at the great warrior Gideon, we can learn much. Now, Gideon was one of the 13 judges of Israel. God chose to save Israel from her own evil and that of her larger enemies. When Gideon was called, he was not the picture of bravery. He was hiding in a cave, scared to death of these Mennonites who were occupying the Israelites' land and stealing their crops and plundering and destroying their property. The Israelites had fallen away from the God of their faith, from their histories and traditions, from their connections to the God of nature and nature's awe. Now, when God came to Gideon, he wasn't convinced. Gideon was a pretty interesting guy. He asked God for proof, and God gave him proof. So with his newfound courage and wisdom, he stood up first to his own people, to his own dad, who had fallen away from his faith and was practicing immoral ways. Twice in the book of Judges it says, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. Sounds awfully familiar, just saying. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. That is not unity of purpose. So Gideon destroys his old man's pagan altar, and all hell breaks loose. The Israeli people want to kill him. They were worshiping man-made idols, the sun, the earth, gold, Whatever someone worships will replace God. They knew not the Lord. And the God of the Jewish Bible is not a big fan of disobedience. But Gideon holds the line. And finally, his people recognize that they become accepting of evil, and they join with Gideon. So now Gideon has a problem. He's faced with insurmountable odds and superior forces. The Mennonites assemble a 135,000-man army. Gideon puts out a call for volunteers. He gets about 32,000. The Bible tells us that Gideon was self-aware. He knew who he was. He was a man of God. He knew what he believed, the word of God. And he knew what he was willing to fight for: God, family, and country. So when God tells Gideon to dismiss all of his troops that were fearful, he does. More than 2/3 of Gideon's men go home. So now he has about 10,000. He's outnumbered 13-1. Now, en route to the battle, after enduring this brutally hot march across blindingly brutal desert sand under an incredibly relentless sun, when his warriors were completely dehydrated and exhausted, God tells Gideon to allow his men to go down to a nearby stream to take a drink. The men run to the water. They're desperately thirsty. They throw their faces in the water. They're splashing the water in their faces, and they're drinking with reckless abandon. But some knelt carefully. Some knelt carefully and kept their eyes on the horizon. God said those men could stay, and all the others had to go away. Now Gideon was down to 300 soldiers. He's outnumbered 450-1. The ones who were left were the careful, the courageous, the watchful, and the unafraid. Gideon's warriors won because numbers don't always matter. They won because they knew themselves. They knew what they believed in. They were united in purpose. They knew what they were willing to fight for: God, family, and country. And they kept their eyes on the horizon. That's what it means to be self-aware. That's what it means to be united in purpose. You see, many may be called, but few are chosen. Great numbers don't ensure great success. Look at King Leonidas at Thermopylae. Only 300 Spartans against Pericles' millions. And for a time, the time he needed, he held the line. They were united in purpose, their eyes on the horizon. And history continues with its march of examples of those who knew who they were, knew what they believed in, and knew what they were willing to fight for, prevailing against extraordinary circumstances. The Romantic poet Shakespeare, if you remember back to Henry V on the fields of Anacourt, the Feast of St. Crispin's, his army's decimated after many failed battles. He has just a small band of warriors left with him, and they were exhausted. They're facing sure extermination tomorrow by 20,000 of France's most elite mounted knights. They are going to be slaughtered. The bard, Shakespeare, put these words into Henry's mouth the night before the battle when he hears one of his cousins wish for additional men to help them in the fight. Henry says this: "What's he that wishes so, my cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair coz, if we're a mark to die, then we do our country lost. And if to live, the fewer the men, the greater the honor. God's will, I pray thee, not one man more. No, my coz, not a man from England. God's peace, I would not have so great an honor as taken from me as one man more. Methinks me share less. For the best hope I have, I do not want one man more. Not one man more," he thundered. And the next day, outnumbered, exhausted, and bloodied, that small band of warriors prevailed. With their eyes on the horizon, united in purpose, they won. But you're thinking, Gideon, dude from the Bible. King Harry, royalty. King Leonidas, that's all well and good. But they were special. Man of God, chosen, royalty. Not like us, average Joes, sitting here. All of us got a little bit of a past. Well, they say every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. And amongst the greatest firefighters we know, many were highly flawed. Average Joes with troubled youths. And this is fine, because we're not recruiting for the Immanuel Kant Society or the Sisters of Charity. We want the bold. We want the inquisitive. We want the curious. We want the adventurous. We want those that'll bend the rules, bust the line, bat out of turn, do what it takes to win. We should always be careful, though, to never disqualify otherwise talented people with arbitrary and overly restrictive rules and regulations. Several fire departments back in the 1950s passed on this young fellow because he was too small in stature. Many times he applied, and many times he was rejected. But this one nurse saw something special in this guy, in this short little guy, and she added that inch he needed in order to qualify for the fire department. That guy's name was Alan Brunacini. Now, if you go to the United States Naval Academy, you'll find the grave of a guy that we consider to be the father of the United States Navy. Any Navy guys in the room? All right, go Navy. Any Army guys in the room? Get the hell out of here. Well, his name was John Paul Jones. He was a tough and he was a daring sailor. Now, we all know about John Paul Jones, right? But there's a few problems with John Paul Jones's story. First of all, his name is not John Paul Jones. And secondly, he was wanted for murder. Of course, you remember John Paul Jones in the epic battle of the Bonhomme Richard when he screams, "I have just begun to fight!" That part's true. The rest of his story is even more amazing. He was sold into the Merchant Marine by his dad at 13. On the way back on one of his cruises, his captain and the first mate died of fever. He was the only guy who knew how to navigate the ship. He brought the ship safely home. The owners made him his captain. And he was an excellent captain. But he had one small problem. He had an explosive temper if his men didn't perform perfectly. One sailor was whipped so severely by John Paul that he died a couple of weeks later. They hauled John Paul into court for murder, and he was cleared, and that was good. But then came the second charge of murder. They were anchored at Tobago. The men wanted to get off and go into town and get drunk. John Paul refused. The guys tried to get off the ship. John Paul ran one of them through with a sword, killed him instantly, and another trial was scheduled. Now, John Paul Jones didn't like the odds this time, so he stole $50. He went to America and changed his name to John Paul Jones. Now, when the revolution began, he was enamored by the American cause. He joined our Navy, and he got sent out to France. He was based in France. On one of his trips, he sunk 16 British ships and a larger ship called the Ranger. The French loved him. He knew no fear. He knew who he was, and he was devoted to the American cause. The French loved his audacity so much that they gave him a ship, the Bonhomme Richard. The problem was that ship was slow. So on the first trip out, it gets overtaken by a British ship called the Serapis. They couple up with Jones. The Serapis had more guns, it was bigger, it was faster, and within no time, Jones's boat is mincemeat. So John Paul Jones did the only logical thing. He ordered his men to ram the Serapis, he lashes his boat, and he orders his guys to jump on the British ship and attack the British. His men began screaming for him to surrender, and that's when he yelled, "I have just begun to fight!" Now, no one on a sinking ship had ever rammed the other guy and then fought hand to hand and won, but John Paul Jones did. And he sailed the Serapis back into a French port where he became a living legend. He was lionized, and we never hear about him again in American history. Why is that? Well, first, John Paul Jones didn't like the money. He didn't think he was getting paid enough. So he stayed in France for the next couple of 3 years. Additionally, the French women loved him, and he loved them, according to his friends, like every night. Even his best buddy, Ben Franklin, actually told John Paul Jones, who spoke English, that the best way to learn French would be to share a bed with a pretty partner every night, and John Paul Jones got to be pretty fluent in French. Now, America wasn't able to find a ship for Jones, but Catherine the Great, she did find a ship for Jones. Made him an admiral in her navy. But the jealous Russian admirals created a rumor that he raped someone. It was not true, and he had to leave Russia, and he was ill. He returned to France, but the French Revolution had killed off most of his titled buddies. So on July 18th, 1792, he died, and he was buried in a pauper's grave in France. Now, it's interesting. After the Spanish-American War, which was kind of dicey, Teddy wanted to create American heroes, Teddy Roosevelt. So Teddy told his boys to go look for John Paul Jones's body. Oddly enough, the Frenchman who buried John Paul Jones knew that someday America would come looking for its hero. So he buried John Paul Jones in a lead casket filled with alcohol. So when they dug him up, they knew it was him. Teddy says, bring them home. So on April 24th, 1906, more than 100 years after John Paul Jones's death, he was interred at the Naval Academy. Not bad for a man who had to change his name over a murder rap and ended his career as an admiral in the Russian Navy. So heroes aren't perfect. We don't need choir boys or perfect people to be firefighters. We might want to steer clear of guys that kill people for imperfect performance. Other than that, but John Paul Jones in his youth, he lacked his self-awareness that he got later in life. As a young man, he wasn't sure what he believed in, but he found that in his embrace of the American ideal. And as a young man, he didn't know what he was willing to fight for. But he found that unity of purpose in liberty and justice for all. So what do we take from the father of our Navy as we mold ourselves and our future leaders to our calling? First, we must imbue in ourselves and our future leaders laualima, unity of purpose. We must clearly express our unified worldview, our fundamental principles. We exist to serve. Humanity is first and foremost in all we do. We must engender a profound respect for others. We do not judge and we do not discriminate. We must honor our code. We must never besmirch the good name of the fire service. We must teach our future leaders to discern. We must teach our future leaders to make decisions which reflect our shared unity of purpose. In doing those things, we keep our eyes on the horizon. We embrace total victory. But doing so demands actually more than total commitment. Every firefighter must be captured by this relentless obsession with finding new challenges every day. Not in being less challenged, but more challenged. Not one man more. What an idea. A relentless drive, obsessed with finding better ways to tackle the problems that challenge us. The morally heroic and virtuous believe today what we believed 10 years ago, what we believed 20 years ago, what our forefathers believed 100 years ago and 1,000 years ago. You know, every firefighter has always believed that we exist to serve humanity. It's fascinating. The first firefighters, the Vigil in Latin means watchman. Eyes on their horizon. We believe there's a greater good, and we are willing to lay down our lives for our brothers. On January 23rd, 2005, it's a day that we'll always call Black Sunday. On that morning of that dreadful day, a nor'easter was blowing with winds at about 45 miles an hour, and it was just about before 8 o'clock when the alarm was struck for 236 East 178th Street in the Bronx. FDNY firefighters from 42, 46, 75, 43, ladders 27, 33, 59, Squad 51, Battalion 3, Rescue 19, and Division 7 responded. A third alarm was transmitted when that fire gained headway on that 40 by 90 Class 3 non-fireproof multiple dwelling with 3 apartments per floor. But the building had a hidden problem. Multiple dwelling apartments, 3 per floor. That hidden problem would cost the life of 3 firefighters. Illegal SROs, single-room occupancies existed in the legal apartments alongside with illegal walls in the fire apartments directly over the fire apartment. The illegal room occupancies, locked with padlocks, helped that fire to extend in unexpected and dynamic ways, and it cut off the secondary means of egress. Ladder 27's inside team, Curtis Mayran, Eugene Skowalski, and probationary firefighter Brendan Cawley, they were assigned to the top floor above the fire to search for life. Rescue 3's inside team, Captain King and Jeff Cool, Joey DiBernardo, were assigned to assist Ladder 27 to search above the fire for life. Engine 42 was on the fire floor, and they were in the process of knocking the fire down when they had a water supply issue, and they had to back out. Battalion 19 ordered Engine 75 to bring their line down from the top floor to the fire floor. Ladder 27 and Rescue 3 would press on, united in purpose, searching for someone reported missing on the possible floor with extension. Captain King directs Cool to open up a small opening in one of the walls, and immediately fire starts basting out and rolling over the crew, completely engulfing the fire apartment. King calls out for an urgent message, asking for a line to get down on the fire floor. Cool calls out to the other firefighters to let them know that they've got fire behind them and we got to go. The other firefighters looked at him and said, "We're trapped." With intense fire blowing out from ceiling to floor, the trapped firefighters, they found a bedroom, they shut the door, and they started racing around inside of it. Mayday after mayday after mayday was transmitted. The trapped firefighters continued to race around. They should have been able to get to the fire escape, but the illegal walls in that illegal apartment prevented their escape. Cool, Mayran, Stowalski, and Cawley were trapped in one bedroom, and DiBernardo was trapped in the bedroom next to them. The fire was quickly coming down top to floor and it's making its way further and further in the bedroom. Mayday after mayday is transmitted. Now, the other crews are working feverishly to try to get to them. They're trying to throw ladders. They're trying to do a rope rescue from the roof, but time's running out. Cool, Mayran, Cawley, they're now positioned at the windows, and it got so bad that they pushed Cool out onto an air conditioning unit, a portable air conditioning unit, 5 stories above the ground. Time was running out. 27's inside team is huddled by the windows. And one by one, they jump from those windows to the ground 50 feet below. Concrete. Lieutenant John Mayran went first, showing his men that this was the only way out, followed by probationary firefighter Brendan Cawley. This was Cawley's very first fire. The last to exit the window from that team was Eugene Skowalski. Now, Eugene rolled out of the window, but his harness got hooked up on a child gate, and he hung there for about 10 seconds, upside down, facing the concrete 50 feet below. He broke free, and he fell. Now, only Cool and DiBernardo remained. Cool looks to his left. He sees Joey, and he says, "Yo, Joey, I got a rope." Joey says, "Throw it to me. You got a wife and kids. You go first." Cool starts to argue with him, but Joey's having none of it. "You go first." So finally, with intense fire blowing out over Cool's head, he can't take it anymore. He throws one end of the rope to Joey and throws the other part of the rope around himself like a belay, right? So he's getting ready to hang. Joey wraps it around his arm, puts some friction on it under his foot, and with that, Jeff rolls out off the air conditioner with the rope around him. He kind of pendulums to Joey and the 2-3 exposure, hits the wall right under Joey, and his hands let go of the rope. And Jeff plunges to the ground below. Joey uses that same rope. He clips it to a child guard gate. He wraps it around himself in a belay fashion, and out the window he goes. He gets about 15 feet down, and Joey lost control of the rope. Now, Joey falls past Jeff into the subterranean entrance 60 feet to the ground. John below, he's the chauffeur of 27. He's trapped on the top floor. We believe he was hearing the Mayday messages, so he went to the top floor in hopes of maybe helping out. John also jumps. Lieutenant John Ballou, firefighter Joey DiBernardo, Lieutenant Kurt Mayran, would all die from the injuries they received. All the other men were injured beyond imagination. But they were loyal. They were unafraid. They were united in purpose. Their eyes were on the horizon. They put others above self. They rose to the occasion. They held the line. Joey DiBernardo, he's the archetype of what it means to be a good firefighter. He knew himself well. He knew what he believed in. He knew what he was willing to fight for. He knew what could be done. He knew what might be done. He knew what ought to be done. And he knew what must be done. Joey gave away his place despite the fact that he was going to suffer a fire and horrible death to Jeff, because Jeff had a wife and kids. Joey placed Jeff over himself. On February 12th of this year, the Oakland Fire Department responds to a structure fire in a residential building. On arrival, the first aid engine company officer reports that they got fire and smoke from the 7th floor, and they got people coming out the windows, jumping from balcony to balcony to avoid the fire. With no time to lose, in order to make those rescues, the first engine company officer decides to take the elevator to the floor below. When the elevator doors open, suddenly the crew is overcome by incredible heat and energy and smoke. The senior firefighter and the officer try valiantly to regain control of those elevator doors, but they can't. They both fall to the floor of the elevator unconscious and disabled. The third member of the crew, Fabian, he'd just come off a light duty and rescue training. So Fabian dives to the corner of this elevator, and he has big deep breath and just enough time to don his mask and get himself together. He crawls over to his two crewmates. He calls the mayday. After quickly assessing them, he realizes that he would need help to move these two people. Now, Fabian could hear some noise from the stairwell, so he knew other crews were coming up there. The fire is everywhere. With incredible courage, all by himself, he crawls towards the noise. He finds the stairwell entrance. He opens it up. The ascending crews come up there. Fabian then joins with those crews, crawls back through the fire floor. Fire everywhere, smoke and heat beating down on him. They find the two down members, and with their help, the two crews, they're able to extricate the down captain and the senior firefighter back to the stairwell where they would both survive. But Fabian isn't done. He joins with those crews, and they continue to fight that fire on the fire floor. He doesn't go down. He's still focused on those civilians reported trapped above them. Joey, Jeff, Fabian, regular firefighters. They wouldn't call themselves heroes, and neither would you. But they are, because they were united in purpose. All faced overwhelming odds. All rose to the challenge and performed miraculously. So yeah, lately, some people have been commenting, complaining about the lower numbers of applicants, both on the career and volunteer side. But maybe, just maybe, the answer is not in lowering any standard, any qualification or barrier. Maybe the answer is in holding the line. Or maybe even raising the bar. This is an elite calling. We are the bravest. We don't want losers or quitters or the fearful joining our ranks. We want the best, those with their eyes on the horizon. We are the best, and demanding the best from people is not exclusionary or discriminatory. It's how you build great teams. We cannot have the best if we cannot have the best. If we cannot have the best, then I wouldn't have one man more. Not one. It's a matter of survival. It's a matter of survival for the people we serve and us as an institution that's revered the world over for its commitment to relentless perfection, for its commitment to the lives of our citizens and our brothers. The most important thing that God ever made, mankind. And to address my friend Jason Whitlock, if faced with another epic 9/11 challenge, will America's firefighters rise to the occasion? He was skeptical. I'm not. We will. You will. We're unapologetically American firefighters, unapologetically Hawaiian firefighters. You've endured the ebb and flow of popular culture. We've endured the ever-changing whims of society. We've endured in good times and bad, in absurd times and disturbed times. Our eyes, though, unlike popular culture, are forever on the horizon. We exist to serve. We are united in purpose. We know who we are and what we believe in. We exist to serve, and we know what we are willing to fight and die for. God, family, and country. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.